Hey, welcome back to Overnight Accountants course on Realtors and reducing taxes. Now we're going to continue with the home office deduction. In this section we're going to be discussing the actual cost method. As you're going to learn in this section, the actual cost method can be quite complicated, and if you're planning on using the simplified method, which is, well, as you learned in an earlier section, it is, well, simple, you may not have to watch this part of the course. And it is going to be several sections and it's going to be pretty long. It's going to have a lot of valuable information in it. So let's get started. All right, first let's review the two methods, simplified method, as you know, and the actual cost method, which we're discussing in this section of the course. Remember, you can switch between the two methods each year. However, once you make that decision, you can't go back and change it later. So let's say you use a simplified method this year, and then next year you go back in your review, or after you file your tax return, you discover, oh man, I could have tripled my deduction by doing the actual cost method. Once you file that return, it's too late. You can't go back and what we call amend that return. So once you make the decision, it's made. So I want to make sure you understand also, if you're new to real estate, or if you're new to your business, or you're new to having a home office, if you start using it during the year, you're going to have to prorate that deduction for the part of the year that you actually use the home office. Now, I want to let you know also that you can deduct some expenses that you may believe are tangentially or indirectly related to your home office, even if you don't have a home office. We're going to go to a few of these examples. If you have, let's say you have a fax line that goes into your home, you can't deduct your first landline. That's a no-no. You can't ever do that, and most of us are using cell phones now anyways. But let's say you have a dedicated fax line that's for your business, or you have a phone line that's for your business, for your real estate business, and you have an ad in the phone book. So you're using that line. You can deduct that line even if you can't take the home office. You can still deduct that on your Schedule C. That won't go on the 8829 form, which we're discussing in this section. Let's say you have a business computer, a computer you use only for business. Maybe you have a laptop you only use for business, but you do most of the work at home. Even if you don't have a home office, you can still deduct that computer. You may have to depreciate it, but you can still get the deduction. Another example, a fax machine. Don't forget your office supplies if you have a home office. Even if you can't take the home office deduction, you can still deduct those. Maybe you have some office furniture, maybe like a filing cabinet you keep your files in. Maybe you have a scanner that you use to scan in your PDFs and save them to your business computer. Remember, you can still deduct those items. However, they're going to be deducted on Schedule C on the appropriate line and not on the 8829 form. Also good to remember, internet. A lot of folks forget the internet. You are probably using the internet, be it on your iPad, your cell phone, or whatever it might be, the computer. You're doing a lot of research for your clients. You probably have a percentage use of that internet, or of the internet rather, that you can show is for business. As long as it's a reasonable percentage, you can still deduct that, and that would be deducted on the Schedule C. Wouldn't be on the 8829 form. So I just want to make you aware of that. You can deduct any ordinary and necessary business expense related to your business if it qualifies. So just remember, that's kind of the rule there. Even if you don't have a qualified home office, which we discussed earlier what the definition is, there's still some expenses you can take. So I don't want you to miss out on any of those expenses. So let's get into the actual cost method. Let's do an overview here. As I mentioned earlier, it's reported on Form 8829. It is complex and time consuming, though, if you're going to maximize this deduction. It is a fairly complex deduction. It's similar to claiming actual auto expenses. It may actually be a little, well, probably a good bit more complicated than that because of the manner in which you got to report it. So many errors and misunderstandings that occur on this form. Hopefully we're going to help you minimize those by taking this course and help you maximize the deduction. So remember, if we can find you $1,000 in deductions you didn't know about before, didn't have, you just made yourself between $300 and $430 that you get to keep in your pocket and reinvest in your business. That's a win-win deal for me and you. All right, now just to show you how complicated it is, there's a publication called Publication 587, Business Use of Your Home. We probably have a copy of that in the resources section of this course if you want to check it out. You're going to notice, however, that it's 35 pages of very confusing, 6-point font? I don't know, 6 to 8-point font. So there's a lot of words in there that confuses many of us, and of course probably many of you if you try to go that route. So hopefully we'll simplify that a little bit for you. This course is really geared to help you maximize deductions, and we also want you to minimize errors, not making many of the mistakes I've seen over the years on this Form 8829. I can tell you from experience, and one of the reasons we're doing this course, I don't recall ever seeing a Form 8829 that was done by somebody doing their own taxes that was completely done properly. In many cases, they're taking deductions they can't. They're filling things out on the wrong lines. They're entering it incorrectly into their software. And other times, also, they're not deducting what they can deduct. So you see it both ways. You see them getting outrageous deductions that they're really not entitled to. If the IRS were to look at it, they'd be in pretty big trouble. So we want to minimize errors and help you maximize your deduction. If you have any specific questions related to this form, please don't send them during tax season. I don't know how quickly we can get back to you. But remember, we have a frequently asked questions section in this module or on the website for this course that someone else may have already asked the question and we've answered it. If you want to pose a question, you can send us an email, or we may have something set up there for you to ask directly into the website. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work for this course yet, but we'll get back to you and then we'll share that answer with others. May not be very timely, however, particularly if you're waiting to the busy season when everybody's busy and everybody's asking questions at the same time. Just want to let you know this there. Check that out if you have specific questions. We do recommend a professional if you are using the actual cost method because of the complexity and a number of errors. Even if you're using a professional, this will help you provide them the information that they need to prepare your return, maximize the deduction, because they're going to be busy and they're not going to ask you everything. You forget to give them something, chances are they're not going to ask, or they're not going to fish for every single deduction that they can get you, simply because you're doing this at a busy time of year. If you're doing it yourself, if you're one of those do-it-yourselfers that are taking this course, I recommend a professional. However, I know many of you are really bent on doing your own taxes, and I'm fine with that. However, I want to point out, make sure you use the same software every year, and make sure you update whatever you used in 2017, 2018. Make sure you bring in your file from the previous years, because there's a lot of carryover stuff, deductions and carryover items that need to be carried from one year to the next. And I promise you, if you're not doing this, if you're not bringing it over, what we call pro forma in our business, you're not bringing forward last year's information, you're not going to know where to plug this information is. You're going to miss it. Your tax return is going to be incorrect, and it may be incorrect for years after that. So make sure you update from the previous year. I also want to point out that you must depreciate the office portion of your home if you own a home. You must depreciate that portion of your home office. This can cause a taxable event in the event that you sell your house, even years after you stop using your house as a home office, or you stop using your home office. It will probably create a taxable event when you sell your house if you sell it at a gain. You sell it at a loss, you don't need to worry about it so much. You sell it at a gain, and it will create a taxable event. So that's one of the reasons you need to carry that software over year after year after year. It's very important. Now, what it's going to allow you to do is going to allow you, using the actual cost method, you're going to be able to deduct a portion of common household expenses. You can also deduct 100% of expenses that are directly related to your home office area. So it's pretty cool. You can deduct a percentage of your common household expenses based on square footage. We'll go over that in a bit. And you can also deduct 100% of expenses only related to the home office. Flip side of that, or the challenge is you must track and prove all your claimed expenses. So it's a lot of record keeping involved in this, and a lot of time you're going to invest in maximizing this deduction if you decide not to take the standard or the simplified method, which is a square footage, $5 times per square foot up to 300 square feet. Certain costs can cause a loss on this return. Remember, with the simplified method, you really couldn't use it. If you had a loss in your business, if you're new to the business, you had a bad year, the simplified method cannot create a loss. However, the actual cost method can create a loss up to an extent, and the extent of that's going to be the percentage of your qualifying mortgage interest and real estate that would be deductible. You could still generate a loss on your Schedule C with those items. The rest of the costs, however, other expenses, depreciation, are going to be carried over to the following year. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. You can prove a higher deduction for if you're a renter. This could be really good for you, particularly if you have a 3-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom house. Apartment might be a little better based on square footage, but you can literally take that percentage of your rent. If it's a third of the square footage, you can take a third of your rent every month and write that off. We'll discuss how to calculate that here in a little bit. If you have a large home office relative to your house, if you have an expensive home, It could also help you. If it's also going to be best, I recommend it more for established full-time agents who's planning to be in business for a while. If you're established, you're going to be in business for a while. Because of all the carryovers and the complexity involved in this, that's why I usually recommend that. Also, I would recommend this for, or it's going to be best for, shall I say, individuals who are organized, detailed, and you're willing to keep a lot of receipts because you're going to have to do that. Remember, you must be able to prove your deduction. So, as we move on here, let's just talk about using the actual method. I mentioned earlier, it's reported on Form 8829. What we're going to cover here is we're going to cover the office and the home. We're not really going to dig into separate structures because most of you, if you're taking this course, chances are if you have a home office, it's either going to be a single room or even smaller, it might be part of a room. Remember, our goal here, if you remember that's why we have this section tied to the auto expense. And if you're buying this course as a standalone course, I'm sure we have attached that or put the two courses together for the home office deduction and the auto because they're so interrelated here. We want you to have the home office, not because it's a giant deduction as we talked about in the earlier section, but because you get to deduct more of your auto mileage. And for a realtor, that's going to be your biggest expense, probably by far. So we're not going to cover a separate structure. It's relatively rare if you have a separate building on your property that you only use for your office. We're not going to, because it's not going to apply to a lot of folks. We're going to cover the basics in this course because it is really complex, and we're going to show you what is deductible. We're also going to highlight major items and errors to avoid, so you don't become one of those taxpayers who I would run into after they did the taxes on their own. That was just really, basically, it's an ugly return if you're in our business. We just call them ugly returns. So we're going to highlight major items and errors to avoid. So Form 8829, part of the home use for business. Here, business use. Here's an example of the Form 8829. You can print one out. I'm sure we have this in your resources. So you can follow along with this. We're not going to we're going to go over the sections a little bit. We're not going to do this line by line like we do for others because if you have a professional, you don't really care about this so much. You need to know the difference between, you need to know a lot of the definitions I'm talking about. If you're doing it yourself, you're going through an interview process in the software. Hopefully I'm going to help you understand what they're talking about in that software. And when you print out the form after you complete it, or you can kind of see where these things line up. So this is what the form looks like. As you see, it's got different columns here, a lot of stuff going on. It looks a little intimidating, and it can be because it is fairly complex. Using the actual cost method, indirect expenses and depreciation, what we're going to discuss it here in a section. Well, I think this is the next part of the course. But indirect expenses and depreciation are generally based on the square footage percentage of the home. And this square footage is the area. Square footage is the area as a percentage of the total area of the home, and it's reported in Part 1 of Form 8829. You can actually use any measurement to reach a percentage. What the IRS cares about, what we care about, is really having an actual percentage of your home's total area that is used for business, so that way we can allocate or prorate all your indirect expenses and put them in a proper place on that Form 8829. You can use the metric system, you can use cubits if you're into that. I don't know, it's kind of an ancient measurement system, but hey, whatever we want to use, we're going to use square foot because this is a U.S. tax code and we're in the United States and we use square foot here. Okay, most of us do. All right, here's that section of the business of the return I was talking about, or the Form 8829 rather. As you see, it's part of your home use for business. Over here, line 1 is the area regularly used for business. And what we want to get there is we want to know the length and the width, because we want to arrive at square footage, of the room used for the office. So example, if you have an office that is only used for business, remember we went over this earlier section, make sure it's a qualifying home office. But if it's 10 foot by 12 foot room, that's 120 square feet. You multiply length by width, 120 square foot. Okay, let's say you're using part of a room. Let's say you have the have the area in your house. It's a guest room, but you have a guest bed in there, and it's used every now and then for a guest. Not exclusive use anymore. But in that same room, let's say you have a desk, and you have filing cabinet. You have an area around there. You say your sitting area and all that, part of the room. Length times width that area. Let's just say this includes your desk, sitting area, and your filing office storage. Let's say that area is 6 by 5. 6 foot by 5 foot, that gives you 30 square feet. That's how you calculate that for line 1. Now, total area of your home. This can get a little more complex and it can get fairly confusing. Square footage of the home, this can be confusing because the instructions really don't define what area you're supposed to include in this. Our goal, however, is to arrive at a business percentage of shared expenses. Our instructions say you can use any reasonable method to arrive at the square footage of the home. So to be safe, there's some tax court cases around that it's our opinion, being we do this relatively conservatively. If you want to be safe, I would recommend that you include all functional space. So let's say you have a split foyer, you have a house that has a basement, and it has a basement, or your downstairs or your split foyer isn't finished yet. However, it has, let's say it has heat, and let's say it has electric, and it could be used for your home office. There'd be no problem using it for your home office. You just choose not to. And if that's the case, you want to include that square footage as part of your home. Now, if you only use the finished space, you're going to get a higher percentage. You're going to get a higher deduction, and you're going to have to, if you're going to do that, you want to be able to have a reasonable argument or argue your reasoning in making that decision. So if you only use the finished space, you calculate your total square footage of the home, make sure you have a good argument. You got a basement that's not finished? Hey, maybe you don't have the money to finish that area downstairs. That to me seems like a reasonable argument. So anyways, or maybe it's really damp down there and you can't use that space because even though it has heat and electric, there's too much moisture. You don't want to be down there. Maybe you have a health condition. I don't know. Just be able to argue reasonably and using only the finished square space. Okay, here's a rough estimate, or a quick estimate rather, of, let's say you have a 2-story home. This is a quick way to get to your total square footage of the home. Let's say that home is 45 foot by 25 foot wide. There you go. You got, each floor has 1,350 feet. So 45 times 30 is 1,350. You got 2 stories. Times 2, 1,350 times 2, you got 2,700 total square feet in that house. Now, if you went through, and if you want to go through and measure each room, if you want to go through that and write it down and do all the calculations, that square footage may end up being a little lower, which would make your percentage a little higher. However, that's a lot of work. So it's up to you how you want to do it. This is a quick example here. Remember, our goal is auto expenses. We want to be as accurate as we can here. However, the real goal of doing the home office is to get you that additional mileage. This is a relatively small deduction for most of you. Some of you might be big, but for most of you it's going to be relatively small. So then we got to do here, and if you see in box 3, if you got the 8829, we're going to determine your percentage. Your software is going to do a lot of this for you. It's going to do, really, if you plug in the numbers right. We just want to make sure you understand how this works, how this flows, so you understand what's going on with the software if you're using it. If not, you're still going to have to, if you're using a professional, you're going to have to provide them this information for them to correctly do your return. So determining square foot, office area, let's remember 120 square foot of that office area if you're using a room. Total square footage of the home is 2,700 square feet. Percentage office use, you divide the 120 by 2,700, it gives you 0.044. And that, of course, is, if you bring your denominator over or your decimal place over, that's 4.4%. So 4.4% of your home in this example is used for business. We use that to determine your indirect expenses. Now, what you want to do, you just calculate that number 3. It's going to bring it down to number 7. This is FYI only because we're using software. You just want to make sure it's doing it right. So there you go. So that's it for this section, and we're going to continue with actual expenses in the next one. Look forward to seeing you there.